When the gold was discovered in Virginia City in 1863, there were just a few prospectors passing through. They discovered gold in Alder Gulch one evening as they're camped along the creek. When they made that discovery, I think they were astounded, and they went back to cash in some of their gold and collect supplies. And a huge number of miners followed them back to Virginia City. And people flocked here in droves to see what they'd heard about.
Next step was to start building towns and settlements. Virginia City grew up first, and then Alder Gulch expanded with Nevada City, and miners rumored in the neighborhood of 30,000 people.
There were no sawmills in the beginning, and so people used what they could. They would build these little cabins, and then they would put tall false fronts on the in front of them, and they did that because this was a remote, very scary place to live, and they used false fronts to make people think that they were living in a real town.
4 sets of my great-great-grandparents came to Virginia City in the early days between 1863 and 1865 with young families in tow. Virginia City became a city, a thriving metropolis of the day.
Virginia City was this major hub for the first years that there was a population in Montana. It was the first commercial center, the first banks were established here. It was the first transportation hub. The stagecoaches left from here. The first newspaper that was printed in Montana was printed just down the street here.
Gold drew people to the west, people with adventuresome spirits, people of great strength and determination. But there were probably plenty of opportunists that came along at the same time. Those opportunists had a reputation for robbing people of their gold and their valuables. And there developed, according to reputation, a period of lawlessness in the Gulch. A new community develops, no government really in place, people kind of trying to take care of issues themselves. And the vigilantes were formed.
That started what culminated in the hanging of 21 men for the crime of highway robbery, murder, and rape out on the trail.
This is reenacted by the living history folks in a very wonderful, dramatic way. And it is one of those stories that is a legend that will never die, I hope. But the vigilante era was one little blip. And there were other things that happened here that were just as important.
I guess I think of Virginia City as the magnetic core of southwest Montana and perhaps all of Montana. It's really what brought people here.
People came from all corners of the world. There was a huge Jewish population here, and there was also a very large Chinese district down at the end of town. Virginia City became the territorial capital. And Virginia City enjoyed a heyday until about 1875. But then, unfortunately, when the Northern Pacific began to scout its route along Montana, Virginia City was left out. Population dwindled then, and it's been pretty small ever since. What was left here was the memory of that very, very vibrant time that just simply wasn't what it was in the beginning anymore.
People began to move out of the area and get established in other activities and entrenched themselves in life here in southwest Montana.
My family and I moved here to Virginia City in about the fall of 1936. I was just a baby. When we moved here, this was available, so we moved in, and this is where I grew up. This was my mom's and dad's bedroom. Right there must be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It must be 6 layers of time right there. When I was a little kid and we were going through the dumps and everything up Alder Gulch, I had found in perfect condition a Chinese vase or vase, set about this high. Didn't have a chip or anything on it. I came home with that and Mom put it up here. Probably the only really nice thing that she had, you know. Virginia City was dying out at that point in time. There wasn't any jobs. The mining was almost nil. There were very few businesses to keep them going.
I think the population had dropped down to around 75. And so it was practically a ghost town. And Charlie Bovee first came on in 1944. His family were one of the owners of what became General Mills. So he was a wealthy young man and fascinated by history. And he was absolutely astounded to find so many original buildings from the 1860s still intact.
A lot of people had started tearing the buildings down for firewood. It was a very difficult time.
He found the buildings were for sale rather cheaply, and so he decided to purchase the buildings and start restoration of them.
One day he was over in Nevada City walking around and he saw someone beginning to burn a historic cabin. And so Charlie said, well, how about if I buy from you this property? And in Nevada City, many of the buildings had been destroyed. And so it really provided a perfect venue for Charlie to recreate a town. And he began rescuing buildings that were endangered across the state. And today, lining the streets of Nevada City, you see buildings from Fort Benton, from Yellowstone Park, from the different mining camps that were abandoned. And so Nevada City is a recreation. But Virginia City, which is just down the road, has a totally different purpose. Virginia City is a living town. And the buildings that you see in Virginia City are original to the sites that you see them on. Virginia City has more 1860s buildings preserved than any other town in the West.
Really, Charlie Bovee, he has to be credited with saving so many of these examples of architecture which otherwise would have been, either hit by the wrecking ball or met demise some other way.
Charlie Bovee had the idea of kind of letting people have a trip back in time. So he decided to furnish the buildings. He got authentic items and furnished them as they would have been as stores and houses and other things. He'd really started collecting new old stock merchandise and things like the 300 pairs of shoes. They've never been out of the box, exactly as they were about 102 years ago.
All of a sudden we found people coming to see the artifacts, see the old history. It was a godsend to so many of our families.
Charlie Bovee, he started opening some businesses. You could experience what it was like to be in a old days bar. Stay in the Fairweather Inn in an old-fashioned sort of room. The Opera House where you'd attend an old-fashioned play. The players did authentic melodrama as it would have been done in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
No, that would be a pity. Since the moment I
The
saw
players have always been one of the most popular things about the Virginia and Nevada City experience.
You've got the crushing comes of every dick in Scotland Yard.
When Charlie Bovee died, there was a gap in care for the city and all of the things that had been what we call the Bovee collection. The state stepped in and filled the gap. When the legislature started its process of allocating state funds for Virginia City, people came dressed in period garb and costumes, old Western costumes, prospectors, ladies with hoop skirts, and they kind of stayed in character of 100 years ago.
With the state purchase, state of Montana and its people acquired roughly 250 buildings between Virginia and Nevada City. We possess some of the largest and more intact examples of Western mining culture and the pioneer movement in this country. But we've inherited an enormous backlog of preservation needs along with that. Well, the Kramer Building is one of the oldest buildings in Virginia City. These were a classic storefront-styled residence store in the front, living quarters in the back. But it's also held the position of an anchor point within the street here, so there's been a thrust of all these buildings working their way and pushing downhill for the past 140 years. So what we're doing now is trying to install some upgrades to the foundation system. And then the second phase of the project is conserving all of the cultural material within.
It's very interesting to see it go from my home to a historic site that the Bovees had put a nice collection into, and now to a preservation estate, which I think is good.
What's different about folks like Evelyn and others that live here And this extends far beyond just the efforts that the state of Montana is trying to exact here. This is very much a preservation-minded community. And everybody here is very much intent on preserving and keeping Virginia City what it is. Another project we're working on, the Gilbert Brewery, it has definitely been acknowledged one of the rare and fewer examples of rural breweries left in the United States. This one, of course, features all kinds of innovative pioneer technologies, all of which I would have to list among the most critically endangered and valued resources that we have.
The problem is the front of the building is sitting on real bad soils, and it frost jacks every winter. It goes up and down, and it's slowly moving away and down the creek. So we're just now getting started doing this structural stuff.
In the process, we're happy to have ongoing businesses, and the legacy of something like the Brewery Follies adding to the charm and character of this building. The two go hand in hand quite well too, of course, brewing culture and comedy.
This is it, the night of nights.
Our audience, they're coming here to have fun. They're going to have a good time. They're going to laugh a lot. This is the comedy club in the area. This is the nightclub show. This is a great place to work. It's a small, intimate setting. It's an historic building. It's a brewery. I like beer. Most of the people who work for me like beer, so we take a lot of pride in being in Montana's first brewery. Having the preservation work done around us has been incredible. The stone wall was caving in, the growth was taking over, and you could even see in the building it was like kind of bulging out where the wood was. And we come back this spring, and they're out there working, and the stone's getting put together again. That they have such pride in this building, it means a lot to us.
Little cowboy baby of the old corral. Good night.
There is an interesting mix of state-owned properties and private ownership. And that mix provides a vitality to this town and a livelihood for the people who live here.
Hundreds of thousands of tourists come here for the history, but the two towns now offer a lot of modern day amenities, nice little shops, plus hotels and some good restaurants.
Between the two towns is the Alder Gulch Short Line Railroad.
We are fortunate to have a 1910 Baldwin steam locomotive fully restored and running. There was no train line here in Virginia City originally. Charlie Bobby put the line in. When you ride this track, you can see everything from shafts to hydraulicking to the dredging to even areas that were originally gold panned by hand. And that gives people an opportunity to see those areas that are not accessible by road.
In Nevada City, when visitors come to our site, they see the finest examples of what a town in early Montana would have been like. Each year we have dozens of living history interpreters that are volunteers. These people are highly dedicated, very much historians. The experience of stepping into the past is enhanced by utilizing all five senses. You don't hear a lot of sound in the background other than the sounds of the past.
It has so many interpretive opportunities. It's a place where people can come and learn how to do preservation. It's a place where people can come and learn how to do all kinds of frontier-type crafts, wood crafts, and handiwork. It's a place where kids can come and learn about their heritage.
One of the neat projects that we have going on now was the hands-on history camp that has really changed kids' lives.
See the size of this rock right here? And which is heavier? The gold? And look at how much bigger that is than the gold. Well, that proves the principle why we use the gold pan. This is so much heavier than all the other country rock that immediately goes right to the bottom of the gold pan. That's why we call it gold fever. It's hard to quit when you find good gold like that.
It's truly a living classroom like no other, and I would love to see this place used to its fullest extent.
We had the good fortune this summer to host some recognized scholars. These people are wowed at the quality of the resource we have. We've got a real opportunity now to take a leadership role as a state in developing new educational paradigms, and that allows opportunity for people all over the world to come and study and learn and participate in the active historic preservation of this community.
Took some money to purchase the Bovey collection and get things going. Let's not let it go to seed and not be worth the money and labor and the sweat and tears that went into that investment.
This kind of history can't be replaced. If something happens to these towns, then it's gone, and it's gone forever.
Virginia City holds something, I guess, just dear to our hearts. And I would just love for future generations to be able to come back to Virginia City from wherever they might be and see the streets that their ancestors trod, to, in some small part, relive the life that they may have lived.